We continue the shiur in Gemara. The Gemara says that in the zechut of the tzniut of Rachel Imenu, because she had tzniut, that means modesty, humility, therefore she was zocheh, and from her later came Shaul HaMelech, descended from her. Now, why? What is the connection? Because Shaul HaMelech also is known for his tzniut, his humility. And again, because he had this humbleness, this humility, he too was zocheh, that from him came Esther HaMelech. The Gemara says, explain to us, what was the tzniut of Rachel that was so outstanding? A lot of people had tzniut. What was special about her case? The Gemara tells us that the pasuk we find that when Yaakov Avinu came to Rachel, he said to her, I am the brother of your father. Now, this is a pasuk in the Chumash. How could Yaakov Avinu say to her, I am your father's brother, when in truth her father's sister was Yaakov Avinu's mother, which means he was his nephew and not his brother. Why did he say, I am your brother's father? The answer is, what was meant was that he said to her, I want you to marry me. She replied, yes, I am willing to marry you. I'd be very glad to, but my father is a fraud. He's a liar and a cheat. And you will not be able to overcome him. He's going to play tricks that will stop this wedding. So Yaakov Avinu said to her, if he is a fraud, faker, then I am his brother in that category. I'm as good as he is. I can play as many tricks as he can. So she asked him, is it permissible for a tzadik? Accept your proposal for me, but he'll play a trick to give you Leah instead of me as a wife. Yaakov Avinu said to her, we'll outwit him. Here are special signs, these special signs I'm giving you now, and at the night of the wedding, when the bride has her face covered, she cannot be recognized, you hand me these simanim, these signs, these symbols I'm giving you. Although it's you, if at the wedding I see that these simanim are not given to me, I'll know that it's Leah, and I'll stop the wedding. He gave her these simanim, and later on, when that night came, Rachel said to herself, what's going to happen now at the wedding? My sister will suffer a tremendous public embarrassment, because at the wedding itself, all of a sudden Yaakov Avinu will say, no wedding, this is a fake, it's the wrong one. Imagine her embarrassment then. So therefore, what did she do? She gave these simanim to Leah, so that Leah could now fully pretend she was Rachel. This way Yaakov would not stop the wedding. How do we know this to be fact? This is not mentioned in the pasuk in the Chumash. The Gemara says, how do we know that all these things transpired? Because the pasuk says in the Chumash that Yaakov Avinu married Leah. Then it says that it was the next morning, behold, it was Leah. What's the question? Behold, suddenly it was Leah. Until now, it wasn't Leah. She was Leah all the time. The answer is that until now, he thought certainly that she was Rachel, because she had given him the simanim. Now, in the morning he recognized her. He saw that he had received these simanim from Leah due to the tzniut, the humbleness, modesty, and kindness of Rachel. Because of this, Rachel was zocher that from her came forth Shaul HaMelech, King Shaul, who was also possessed with these characteristics. The Gemara asks, where do we find Shaul as being that humble? The Gemara tells us that after Shaul HaMelech had come to Shmuel the prophet, and he had been told he is being appointed as king, he returned, went back to his home, and there he met his uncle. His uncle asked him, where were you, what took place? And he told me he had come to the place of Shmuel the prophet, and the stories that took place, but the pasuk says he did not tell him anything about his becoming king because of his modesty. This was the modesty of Shaul HaMelech. Because of this, he was zocher that from him came forth esteemed. We find the same thing with esteemed. There too it says esteemed told no one about her heritage, that she was a Jew or who her nation was. This too is tzniut. A person who keeps his mouth closed doesn't talk too much. That's tzniut of the mouth, the tongue. Keeping the tongue from speaking too much. So all this, because of their zechut, they were zocher to have come from them the people of the same quality, the same type. In the Megillah we find the pasuk says that after these things, then King Achashverosh elevated Haman to the top ranking position in the kingdom. After these things. Now, after means the story where the two officers of the king, two guards, had plotted to kill the king, to poison the king, and Mordechai had notified the king of this plot. Thereby the king was saved. Immediately after this story, the pasuk says, after this, King Achashverosh elevated Haman to this high position in the kingdom. Now the Gemara says, after what? Why do we say after these things? Why does the pasuk specifically mention after this case? The Gemara asks us to teach us a very important point. That when there is trouble due for the Jews, trouble could consist of anything. Harsh decrees, persecutions, or a plague, a disease. This is called a makah, a plague. But before Hashem sends this plague down, He first creates the cure for this disease, and then He sends down the disease. So that, what was the cure for Haman? The fact that Mordechai had been written down in the King Achashverosh's book as having saved his life, which eventually led to the downfall of Haman. That's why Mordechai was later led through the streets by Haman as a reward. And this brought about the death of Haman. So in other words, this story took place before even Haman became great. Haman was the makah, the plague. Before he became great, first this story happened with these two servants of the king who were reported on by Mordechai. So this was the cure before the plague. This is very different than the case of Goyim. The case of Goyim, the Gemara says Hashem first sends the plague, the makah, and then He brings about a cure. Then He creates a cure for them. So this is the advantage the Jews have over the Goyim. Now, the big question is, the emet, truth, what is the difference? Whether the cure is created before the plague, before the disease, or afterwards. Both cases, the cure is given to the person who has the ailment. What difference does it make to that person when this cure came about? The person becomes sick and he takes a medicine. Does it matter to him whether the medicine was discovered the day after he became sick or a year ago? What difference does it make whether the Jews have the cure created before the disease, before the plague, and the Goyim have it created after the disease strikes them? after this plague? The answer is, very clearly, the Gemara says that a person should always be careful not to become sick. A person should always pray to be saved, spared from illness. Because if he does become sick, then in heaven they say about this person, let's see his record, let's see what mitzvot he has, what good deeds, whether they merit his being cured. So once a person is ill, he then has a whole trial to go through with the Satan attacking, trying to hold back the cure from that person. Here, by the Goyim, with them the plague comes first. They become sick, the cure is not here yet. So the trial in heaven attacks them. Do they rate having a cure? And there is so much opposition to it that until this cure can come about, many times they're destroyed by this plague. But in the case of the Jews, then there cannot be any trial. Should a cure be effected? Should a cure be discovered or created for the Jews in the case of this Makeh? There's no trial because the cure is there already. So that we cannot have an actual trial in heaven. This is in the case of the Jews in general. Of course, in the case of an individual, a single Jew, he must be very careful to guard himself against wrong, and not to deserve becoming ill, so he shouldn't have to then bring zechut. But the major difference between the Jews and the Goyim is that for the Jews the cure is created first, and that's why the cure is given to them more smoothly and easily afterwards. The Gemara tells us that Haman came before the king and requested that the king sign and seal an order to wipe out the Jews from his kingdom. Now, King Ahasuerus was evil anyhow. There's no question about the fact that he too was happy to find some means of eliminating this Jewish problem. So that the Gemara says that there was sort of a meeting in the minds between these two. But the Gemara tells us an example. One person, there are two people. One man owns a field. In his field he has a large mound of earth. Now, this mound of earth is in his way. What can he do to get rid of it? He can't find a place where to dispose of it. His neighbor has a field. In his field he has a big ditch. And this ditch is something that's dangerous for people who visit him, himself. He needs something to fill in this ditch with. Now, what happens? The one who has this large mound of earth comes to his neighbor and says, perhaps you want to take this mound of earth and I'll pay you for it. Take it to remove it from my field. The other one says, or rather, the other way around, the Gemara says, that the person who has this big ditch in his field comes to the man with the large mound of earth and says, would you please sell me that earth? I need it to fill up my ditch with. The one with the large mound of earth says, sell it to you. I'd be happy if you took it for nothing. In fact, I'd even pay you to take it away. So both are happy now. This one has too much earth, this one has a ditch. They both meet perfectly. Both are satisfied. Same thing too. Haman came to Ahasuerus and said, I'd like to pay you a large sum of money to seal the doom of the Jews. Ahasuerus said, pay me for it. I want to get rid of them. I'm anxious to get them out. I don't want any money from you. I'd be happy if you found the means of getting them out. So there was actually no difficulty in Haman to persuade Ahasuerus to sign and seal this order. Yet it had to be legal. Haman was evil-minded, and he used a very strong argument to convince the king legally that the Jews should be eradicated. He said these Jews are rebellious. They are against the king, against the kingdom. To prove that they are revolutionists, he said, look at the Jews. They're the only type of people who have complete, utter disrespect for the king. And of course, though you haven't seen this disrespect, but I can prove it to you easily. Take any Jew. he has a glass of wine, and a fly falls into this wine. That fly is a disgusting item. Very few people would drink that wine. Yet, the average one would take the fly, and then he would throw it out, get rid of the fly, clean off the top of the glass, and he would drink that wine. That's a disgusting item, and yet he would still drink the wine. Take a Jew with a cup of wine, and let the mighty king touch this cup of wine, the Jew will smash the cup to the ground with the wine. He wouldn't drink it. Because, of course, the law is that if a goy touches wine, it becomes tarif. At this point, Aharon said, look at the disrespect for a king. A dirty fly does not contaminate their wine. And the touch of the king, not touching the wine, touching the glass, the outside, contaminates their wine. Is there greater disrespect than that? This was convincing enough for the king. And he signed and sealed this order. Then, Aharon had to choose a time for this order to be carried out, for the elimination of this Jewish problem. He had to decide upon a date, a month. Then he drew lots. That's where the word purim comes from. Purim means raffles or lots. He took 12 slips of paper, wrote down the names of the months on each one, and he wanted to draw one. That one should be the deciding month in which the Jews should be wiped out. But as he drew each one, he felt that he knew that past history showed that the enemies of the Jews were wiped out. So many big empires had fallen who had attacked the Jews. He didn't want to be one of them. He said he's got to play with luck. The luck should be on his side. When he picked out a slip of paper with the word Nisan on it, he said the month of Nisan has the holiday of Pesach, and the holiday of Pesach is a lucky holiday for the Jews. This is when their enemy, all the Egyptians, were destroyed. So this month is not good a month to select to attack the Jews. He dropped that. He went further and he came to different months, the month of Sivan, the holiday of Shavuot. That's the most important day in Jewish history. They receive the Torah. That's not a lucky month to start with the Jews. The month of Tishrei has a lot of holidays in it. He went through the months that way and found that none of them fit. So he picked out the month of Adar, and then he said, this is a lucky month for me, because this is a bad or a sad month for the Jews. The month of Adar is the month in which the greatest leader of the Jews passed away. Moshe Rabbeinu passed away on the 7th day of Adar. Therefore, he said, this is the month when the Jewish luck is down. I'll pick on this month to make the decree against the Jews, which is the month, of course, when Purim comes out, the holiday of Purim. But the Gemara says, what was Haman's mistake? The mistake was that he did not realize. Now notice the wording in the Gemara. He did not realize that on the 7th day of Adar, Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, and on the 7th day of Adar, Moshe Rabbeinu was born. A birth, of course, is good fortune, luck. The Zohar Kadosh tells us that every person has mazal, his good luck shine, and each person's special luck shines on his birth date. That's a special day in which there's a special mazal for it. Which means here simply that this is not bad luck for the Jews, because this is a day when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. On the contrary, he was born on this day too. That was good fortune for the Jews. This is the simple translation. Tamina Tanzel says, let's note these words. The words should have been, if this is the case, the words should have been, on the 7th day of Adar, Moshe Rabbeinu was born. On the 7th day of Adar, Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. The birth comes first, then he passed away. But the Gemara says it the other way around, meaning to teach us that a tzadik is not born actually until the day he passes away. That's the real birth of a tzaddik. When a tzaddik is born, he's equal to any other child born. All children are born equal. They all are born without sins, with pure records. They're all the same. As they grow, then they prove themselves. Tzaddikim add to their mitzvot, the Shayim add to their sins. On the day of passing, that's when life really begins. That's when the true life begins. So a tzadik is proven the day of his passing. The seventh day of Adar, Moshe Rabbeinu passed away. And on that seventh day of Adar, that same day, he was born. The day of his passing was the day of his birth. Because that's when Moshe Rabbeinu's greatness shone forth. How much? For the rest of time. For all generations, he is Moshe Rabbeinu, our Rabbi, and he continues to live with us in spirit and in actuality. The Zohar Kadosh says that every single generation, a spark, a part of Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama enters into the tzadik of that generation. Each one has a slight degree of gilgul of Moshe Rabbeinu in him. The bigger the tzadik, the greater amount of the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu in him. On that day he is born, so therefore that day of 7 of Adar is a very fortunate day for the Jews of all time. This was a day that Haman picked out, and of course this was his downfall. All enemies of the Jews should suffer that same downfall. The Gemara says that there were 4 women in this world who possessed the highest degree of beauty ever. These 4 were Sarah Imenu, Sarah, the first mother of the Jews, the wife of Avraham Avinu, and as is mentioned, her beauty was so great, her beauty was so radiant, that when Avraham Avinu took his wife to Egypt, he was afraid that she would be kidnapped and taken to the king. He placed her in a box, a chest, a special chest, and when he came to Egypt, he had to go through customs. In customs, he was asked, "What have you got in there?" He said, "I have certain object of value." And they said, "Value, it might be expensive materials." He said, "Fine, whatever it is, I'll pay for the customs duty." And they said, "It might be more than that, it might be gold." He said, "I'll pay the price of gold." He said, "It might be diamonds." He said, "I'll pay whatever price you put on it." So they said, "If that's the case, we don't want any more guesswork. If you're willing to pay that much, we want to see what's in it." And they opened this chest. The radiance shone forth so that it lit up the entire land. And they said, "This must be taken before the king." When Avraham Avinu said to Sarah, "I must put you into a chest," it says he saw Sarah. This was years after marriage, and he saw that she was beauty. Imagine being married to such beauty and not realizing it for years. Highest degree of beauty in the world, and not knowing it. So great was the tzniut of Avraham Avinu. So great was his purity in this respect that he never looked at a woman, not even his own wife, not to let his eyes be led into enjoying that type of ta'avah, that desire for women. Even his own wife has such beauty he never realized, never knew what she looked like until that day when this dangerous moment arose. But this was the case of Sarah, the first one of the greatest beauty in existence. The second one was Rachav. Rachav was the woman who took in the spies when the spies were sent to investigate the land of Israel, and the people living in Canaanites were out to get these spies to kill them. This woman, Achav, took them into her house, protected them, and saved their lives. But this later, in turn, the Jews promised her safety, that when they wipe out the countries living in Israel, the Goyim there, her life would be spared. Not only was her life spared, but she became the wife of Yehoshua, the leader of the Jews, student of Moshe Rabbeinu. What is strange about that? What seems to be strange is the fact that Rachav was a zonah. A zonah who was so particular because of her beauty that only the greatest, the elite, kings and princes came to her. But her beauty was that great. The Gemara says that a person, years later, if he would just mention her name, if he had seen her, then it would have a tremendously evil effect upon him. He'd be so overcome by her beauty. He'd be so aroused by just the mention of her name. This was a degree of beauty, the fact she was a zonah, but this shows too that a person in the lowest depth of tum'ah, man or woman, can do Teshuva and rise to the highest degree, of kedusha. The Chav rose from the lowest woman in the world to the position of queen of the world. What is a greater queen than the wife of the chief rabbi, the leader, the king of the Jews? Yehoshua at that time, the student of Moshe Rabbeinu, the holiest Jew alive and the leader of all Jews, took her as his wife. This too is a case of extraordinary beauty, Rachav. Third was Abigail, the wife of Naval. Naval was the word Naval means yes. Necessary for his sustenance. And for this, King David vowed revenge. Abigail, his wife, came to King David at night. She appeared before him and she pleaded that King David not spill blood in vain. And she showed that she was a prophetess because she foretold that he would become great one day, shortly. And she said to him, "When you do become great, please keep me in mind." She already looked ahead to the future. In other words, take me for a wife. Sort of a proposal in advance. Shortly afterwards, her husband died, and King David married Abigail. This is one of the wives of King David, but she too is one of the 4 women of greatest beauty, because when she left King David, the Gemara says that her sleeve rolled up a bit, and if you can imagine that there's beauty that produces radiance, shine lit up the night. So great was her beauty. Fourth one of unusual beauty was Queen Esther. She too, we said that she won the Miss Universe contest. It was put on by King Ahasuerus because she possessed the greatest beauty in the world. However, there is a dispute about this in the Gemara among rabbis. Some say that Queen Esther was not that much of a beauty. She was average beauty, but she just possessed charm, not actual physical beauty. So for those rabbis that say she has a special charm, then who was the fourth one? The fourth one was Vashti. Queen Vashti, the wife of Ahasuerus. And this shows what degree of charm she had. But Ahasuerus had Vashti killed, but he was pacified. He was satisfied with Queen Esther to take her place. Though there was no match in beauty, her charm surpassed the beauty of Vashti. This is what the Gemara says. Tosafot asks a question. If we are listing women of beauty, we list the woman who had the greatest beauty of all. When the Gemara tells us that this term, it sounds like a difficult term to use, but the Gemara uses to show us the difference, the contrast. Just like comparing the beauty of an ape to a man. Apes' looks are, we use the word ape to symbolize ugliness. As far apart as the handsomeness of an ape is to a man, that's how far in ratio, Lahavdil, was the comparison of Sarah's beauty to Chava, the wife of Adam. So much superior beauty was Chava to Sarah. So since Chava was definitely the greatest beauty that ever lived, why doesn't the Gemara list here Chava is one of the greatest beauties? When certainly there's no question made about this at all. So the what answers, we are speaking about beauty that is born. That's unusual. Beauty that's Hashem created Chava. Naturally, his creation is one of heavenly beauty. There's nothing to marvel at there. But a person being born from parents and being different than the parents and that it possesses unusual beauty, this the Gemara lists as Sarah, Yaakov, Abigail, and Esther or Vashti. The next question is though about this. Since when are we interested in physical beauty? We know that the Gemara says Abraham didn't even look at his own wife. A man is not supposed to look at a woman, not supposed to admire beauty. So why does the Gemara have to tell us here about beauty in women? It's asur to look. The Gemara says that Rabbi Arizal, when he went with his students, and there was a woman in front of him, he told them, move quickly, get out of this Gehinom. Don't let this Gehinom stand in front of you. You might see her, it might lead you to Gehinom, might lead you to bad thoughts. Get in front of them. Let them behind you and not in front of you. So why should the Gemara here tell us about the beauty of women, especially too, and even King Solomon? It says in the last chapter of Mishlei, the wise saying of King Solomon, he states with Ferush, Sheker hachem vehevel hayofi. Beauty is worthless, in vain. What counts? Only Isha Yirat Hashem Hitit Halal. Only a woman who has the fear of Hashem, that's considered beauty. Beauty is beauty of character. Character that's religious, that's loyal to Hashem, that's considered beauty. So why does the Gemara here tell us about this physical beauty of women? The answer is that the Gemara tells us about these women who possess both. In other words, a person who is very great, very religious, does not necessarily have to sacrifice the physical attributes. Not necessarily is one who's very religious ugly looking. You can have a very religious person and still be superior physically to the least religious person. Here you have four women who are all tzaddik, the wives of Avraham, Avinu, Yehoshua, and King David, and Mordechai tzaddik. Their wives were surely Yirat Hashem. They know Hashem, they fear Hashem, they were tzaddik, each one. Yet they had, in addition, this physical beauty too. So a person could be a tzaddik and still have more physical attraction and a better physical life than the worst of the Hashem. The one who says that the fourth one was not Esther Amarka, but Vashti, who was a Rashad, evil, this is included too to tell us that they teach us the greatness of the miracle of Purim. Just put there for that reason. To show us that here's a case of Vashti who was superior in beauty to everyone in the world. Or how could she be eliminated? Yet despite this miracle of Purim was that she was done away with, and in her place came Esther HaMelekah, who brought about the Yeshua, the victory for the Jews. When finally Queen Esther came before Achashverosh and she pleaded for her people, but she said she has a request to make. Before she revealed this request, Achashverosh said to her, whatever you ask, I will grant you, up to half of my kingdom. The Gemara says, I'll give you up to half of my kingdom. And that's very unusual to give away half of one's kingdom. It's a term used, but it's never really meant literally. Does that mean that he meant to say, I'll give you half of my kingdom if you ask for it? The Yemenite says, definitely not. It means, I'll give you anything except the halfway mark of my kingdom. I rule over the whole world, he said. What part is exactly the halfway mark, the middle of the world? The exact center of the world is the Bet HaMikdash. So I don't know what you're going to ask for. I'll promise you anything. But should you ask for the center of my kingdom, for the Bet HaMikdash, to have the Jews be permitted to rebuild the Bet HaMikdash, this I will not grant you. That's how he kept his mind, his presence of mind, to ensure himself against this one request. That's how evil Achashverosh was. Now the Gemara asks, the Queen asked his request to Achashverosh. What did she ask for? She said, let the king and Haman come to a party that I'm making tonight. What was the reason why she invited Haman too? Why include him on this party? What motive did she have? There must have been a hidden reason. The Megillah does not tell us what that reason is. So the Gemara asks, what was in her mind at the time? One rabbi says that she was setting a trap for Haman, to get him in a room privately, and then be able to trap him somehow with the king, to induce the king to have him killed. Another rabbi, Yeshua, says that she had learned from the Torah, which says that if your enemy is hungry, invite him to a meal. At this meal, he is more apt to have a downfall. So she took this advice and she invited him to this feast too. The Meir says that she invited him to this meal, that perhaps keep him away from committing a crime at that time. He might have hatzlacha he might succeed in carrying out his plan earlier than before. Rabbi Yehuda says that above all she was afraid the king might suspect her of being Jewish. And if she is Jewish, then of course she could not succeed in her request. So in order to mislead him, she invited Haman too. If she was Jewish, she wouldn't invite Haman to the meal. This way she would mislead the king. Menachem says a different reason was. She did it that the Jews should know. And here is a case where the queen, Esther, their Jewish queen, is making a party and inviting Haman to this party. What would the Jews think? We thought we had a big help for us in the king's palace. The result is that we don't have any assistance. What's our next step? Only one alternative, and that is to turn to Hashem in tefillah, prayer. So our motive was invite Haman, this way induce the Jews to pray with more kavanah. Rabbi Yossi said she invited him to have him present at any moment. If she finds the opportune moment to get him destroyed, he should be where she knows he is. And the Gemara tells us that a few more rabbis give different reasons. The Gemara says, one rabbi says, for example, that King Solomon says before a person's downfall, he first has a big elevation. So she figured, invite him to the party, the queen herself invites him, this is his biggest step upwards. The higher he rises, much greater will be his fall. Gemara says, one rabbi met Eliyahu Hanavi, and he asked him a powerful question. This question is so big, so important, that I believe this question should be the question answer should be outstanding in the minds of everyone who is imbued with real, true emunah in the Torah. This should be a guide for every Jew in emunah. The question was, he asked Eliyahu Hanavi, Here we have rabbis of the Gemara. These are rabbis of the Torah. They are debating not a question of law. They're debating a question of actuality, something that actually happened. Now, every single word of the Gemara is true. These are the words of Hashem. I ask you, he said, what does Hashem say? These rabbis debate what did Esther Hamakah have in mind when she invited Haman. What is the truth? What does Hashem say in heaven? What did she have in mind? So, in other words, you're in heaven, there you see Esther Hamakah. You have the actual truth then. Did you ask her what she had in mind? So he answered yes. And the answer was, she had in mind exactly what every one of these rabbis had said. Every one offered a theory as part of what she actually had in mind. In truth, these were all reasons for her inviting Haman. And that means that every single word of these rabbis is truth. Of course, the Torah is the word of Hashem, and every single word they said, though they are debating, it's not actually debate. Each one is offering another reason, another true reason that Esther Hamakah had in mind. And this shows us a lesson for all time that the Torah, which means the Chumash and the Gemara, is all the Shemayim, is all the word of Hashem. Hashem Elokechem Emet. Hashem is truth, and His words are truth. Even when we see that it seems a possibility of question, of argument, where we cannot coincide two statements, we know that both are true because both come from Hashem. Even where our minds cannot conceive this, but the words are from Hashem, and Hashem is infinite in His greatness. So here we have an actual case brought out to light as proof. And this is not brought out now just for this one case. The Gemara tells us in this case to teach us for all time. Whenever we see questions in the Gemara, discussions in the Gemara, to know that these are all pure and true. Every word of the rabbi is right. And this mitzvah of believing in the words of the Gemara being the words of Hashem is one of the major rules of our emunah. One who disbelieves this is called a kofir. And that's why Haman himself had his greatest downfall. The Gemara says that Haman was a kofir against the rabbis. At that time, Mordechai did not believe in his words, which are the words of the Torah. And therefore his penalty was, as the Gemara says, in Olam Haba, in Gehinom, penalty there is to suffer perpetual boiling in the worst type of filth possible, waste matter. And his sin was so great that he even suffered this during his lifetime. And when he led Mordechai on his king's horse, he passed by his own balcony. His daughter had the pail filled with this waste matter, and she poured it down on his head as a symbol of what he's going to have to go through in Olam Haba. All because of the fact that he lacked this emunat chachamim, emunah in the rabbis of the Gemara. So, basic emunah is to believe that every word of the Gemara is from heaven, every word is the word of Hashem. This emunah is the key to our Geulah. We have to believe in Hashem, and believe in His word, because the word of Hashem is Hashem. The zechut of that emunah, then we are certain will be zocher to the Geulah Shleimah, Geulah HaNefesh, Geulah HaGuf, the Geulah the entire Klal Yisrael, the Biyat Mashiach Tzidkenu, the Beherat Yameinu, Amen, Amen. We continue the Shiur in Gemara. The Gemara says that when the main miracle took place, when the king could not sleep, Achashverosh could not sleep, he had his diary read before him, and he decided to reward Mordechai for saving his life. And just at that moment, Haman had come to ask permission to hang Mordechai, and he was summoned before the king, The king asked him advice, what should I do to one whom I want the reward? Haman, thinking if the king meant him, felt that the one thing he himself would like, that he's lacking, is the luxury of feeling the royalty, experiencing royalty. So he gave the king this advice, and the king told him exactly what you said. Go and do to Mordechai a tzadik. Dress him in the king's robes, let him ride the king's horse, lead him through the city, crying before him, this is what the king does to one he wants to reward. Now this was an order by the king. A direct order by the king, if broken, is punishable by death. Haman had no alternative, he had to fulfill it. He came to Mordechai, he wanted to get through with it quickly so he could proceed with his further plan of getting Mordechai killed. He came to Mordechai and he told him, get dressed with the king's robes, get on the king's horse, because the king wants you to experience this reward. Mordechai answered, I cannot do this, I cannot disgrace the clothes of the king unless I am in proper condition, which means I must first be bathed, I must have a haircut. You cannot use the king's articles otherwise. And without that, I refuse to go. If I refuse to go, you're in trouble. So Haman had to fulfill this order. So Haman had no choice again. So he bathed, and then he went to take a haircut. Meanwhile, Esther, Queen Esther, had all the barbers shut down. So that wherever he went, there was no barber available. So he said, we have no way of getting a haircut. Mordechai said, yes we do. You will give me a haircut. Again, Haman had no choice. He was forced to go through with it. In the middle of the haircut, he gave out a deep sigh. Haman. Mordechai asked him, why do you sigh? Haman said, a person like me who is such a high position in the king's eyes, I have to lower myself to give a haircut and to give a rub down, a bathhouse. Mordechai answered, you are a chef. You think I don't know the fact that you were a barber for 22 years in the city of Khartoum? You're only going back to the original trade. You're just like Hitler, who was a paper hanger. 22 years of barber, this is your work, that's where you belong. Afterwards, after the haircut, Haman dressed him, and he said to him, now get up on the horse. Before we go further though, the Megillah points out, when it says that Esther, Hamarka, closed down all the barbers, how is that possible for her to have the barbers shut down? She could not show her hand. Having the barbers shut down without reason proves that she's trying to get at Haman. She had to hide this. She had to, meanwhile, pretend she was a close friend of his. She held him in high esteem. So, how is it possible for her to close him? The answer is that she did not close them with an order by the queen. Esther Hamalkah had Ruach HaKodesh. She was a tzaddiket. She had heavenly powers too. So she just gave a heavenly order. She said a certain shin, a certain word of Kabbalah, and all the doors became shut tight. There was no way of getting into these barber shops. Literally closed these down where they could not be used at all. So therefore, Haman was forced to go to the extreme of giving the haircut himself. Now, Haman said to Mordechai, get up on the king's horse. Mordechai said, I cannot get up on the horse. I can't climb that high myself. because I have just gone through a long period of fasting, 2 weeks. The only way I can climb up is if you bend down and I step on you, use you as a ladder, stool, then get up on the horse. And I was forced to bend down, and as he bent down, Mordechai raised his foot and kicked him in the face. This infuriated Haman. Haman said to Mordechai, I know that in the Torah it says, do not rejoice over the downfall of your enemy. You're taking advantage of me now. So Mordechai answered, you fool, according to the Torah, this pasuk speaks about a Jew, not about a guy like you. On you it's a mitzvah to step, to kick. What was Mordechai's reason for this? What was the profit in kicking him, antagonizing him, baiting him this way? Mordechai's real kavanah, his real motive was, he wanted to get Haman into such a fit of rage by doing these things that Haman would lash out at him and kill him. And if he could get Haman to kill him, automatically the king would have Haman killed, and Haman's decree against the Jews would become void. So Mordechai was anxious to sacrifice his own life, to have himself killed in order to save the Jews. This was his real motive. However, it finally worked out where Mordechai got on the king's horse, and he was led through the city crying out, this is Haman crying, this is what the king does to what he wants to reward. While going, Haman passed by his own home, and on the balcony was seated Haman's daughter and wife. And as they passed, Haman's daughter figured, undoubtedly, this person sitting on a horse is her father. The person leading him must be Mordechai. So she said to her mother, we have a chance to get at our father's enemy, Mordechai. What can we do to add to his shame? She said, there is a large pan of human waste. Take that, throw it on the head of the one leading the horse. Now, the question is, the Gemara tells us this, just this one statement. Why? And how did this pan come about to be there? The rabbis in the Midrash tell us that Haman, when he first advised Achashverosh to kill his wife Vashti, he had a selfish motive then, because he wanted to have his daughter become the queen. That's how he would gain power. So when Achashverosh summoned all the women of the city of Shushan to appear before him in this beauty contest, and then sent his daughter too. But before they could come before Achashverosh, they had to spend a period of time in a certain special building where they were prepared, they were beautified, prepared to come before the king looking properly. Now, in heaven, it was a different decision entirely. And then had Hashem, you want to have your daughter become queen? You want her to look well, to find favor in the eyes of those who see her? That's what you want, but that's not the plan of heaven. So, in heaven she was stricken with a sickness. What sickness was given her? Dysentery. That's a tropical form of diarrhea. Now, of course, we don't speak about such things generally, but the Gemara says when we speak about the Sha'il, it's not to speak about the worst things and the worst disgraceful items about them. So, this caused her to become to cause such disgust in the eyes of her keepers there and others that she was literally thrown out of this place. She couldn't even reach the beginning of this contest. However, this disease remained with her, that she always had to have this pan ready. And now, when Haman came by, she decided to use that pan, which was well stocked, and she threw it over on whom she thought was Mordechai, but instead proved to be Haman. Haman heard the sound, he raised his head, looked up, and was met with downpour. And of course, this caused, in addition to the pain and the suffering, it caused disgrace. And as he raised his head, she recognized her father. And she was so taken aback, so shocked by it, that she jumped off the balcony and committed suicide. So, that's why the pasuk in Megillah says that Haman returned, came home, went to his house, and there he sat down mourning and disgraced, and his head in disgrace. Mourning over the fact that his daughter had died. Head in disgrace over the shower he had just received on his head. And of course, as we mentioned previously, the reason for this was, the Gemara says, this is not just for Haman, but anybody who mocks the words of the rabbis of the Gemara has this penalty forever afterwards in Gehinnom. He is sent to a special place in Gehinnom where he is submerged in boiling the aforementioned item forever after. So that if we want to question where is Haman now, we know in what he is, what type of bath he is taking there. This is the fate of all Hamans who attack the Chachamim. Ken Yovdu Kol Ovecha Hashem, so should all enemies of Hashem be destroyed. Now afterwards, when Haman came to the party, after he had cleaned himself up a little, he was rushed back to the king's house, the palace, the party of esteemed. And there, esteemed came out with the truth. Told the king, there is someone who wants to destroy me and destroy my people. Who is it? This evil man right here. And she pointed. Now, she couldn't contain herself. She was so overwrought that she pointed, and her finger pointed to the king, Achashverosh. She would have gotten in real trouble. An angel came down and quickly pushed her finger away, pointed to Haman. She tried to go back, but the angel was strong. He kept her finger pointing to Haman. The king did not detect this. He saw this Haman, this evil one, trying to kill my queen. He jumped up, beside himself with rage. He didn't know what to do, so he ran for advice. He ran to the garden. He opened the patio doors to the garden. He came out there. In the garden, he saw his servants pulling out, uprooting his trees, his beautiful trees for the garden. So he asked them, Shuktasali, what are you doing here? What's going on in my palace all of a sudden? Who told you to do this? So they said, we don't know. This is the orders of Haman. This, of course, was a trick, a miracle from heaven that these servants suddenly were put into this state of mind where they started to pull out trees for the garden, and into their minds came these words, Haman ordered this. So Achashverosh screamed, he's attacking me from inside and from outside. He ran back into the palace, and as he ran back, Haman had seen that his doom was certain by now, so he leaped forward, fell on his feet, on his knees before Queen Esther and begged for mercy, to plead before her. As he leaped forward, the same angel came, this good angel, and he pushed him on top of Esther. The king came back, he looked, and he said, attacking the queen in front of my eyes, this did it. If there was any chance of mercy before, this sealed Haman's doom for good. So he asked, what do we do to him? And one of the servants came forward, again this good angel, and said, no problem. There's a big tree pole set up, in which Haman wanted to hang Mordechai. and let him hang on his own pole. And so Haman and his 10 sons were hung, and thus ended the threat to the Jews at that time. That's the end of all who attack Jews. Every enemy of the Jews rises to a great height, because the Gemara says anybody who attacks the Jews must become great. Why? So as not to embarrass the Jews. They shouldn't fall into the hands of very low type of people. Big, great leaders, kings, and so on. They become world leaders. But as high as they rise, so deep is their fall afterwards. And the end is always a fall to complete destruction. Very shortly we should be zocher to see the destruction of all the enemies of the Jews. Here it says that the mitzvah of learning Torah is so great, greater even than the building of the Bet HaMikdash. How important is it when Jews do not have a Bet HaMikdash, they get the opportunity to finally build a Bet HaMikdash, and if there's a choice between going to build a Bet HaMikdash or to study Torah, the choice should be the study of Torah rather than the building of the Bet HaMikdash. The Gemara says, how do we prove this? In the case of the greatest living Jew at that time, Ezra HaSofer. Ezra HaSofer is the one who led the Jews out of Galut. After the 70 years of Galut Bavel, led them back to Eretz Yisrael, there to rebuild the Bet HaMikdash, to build a second Bet HaMikdash. Now, he led the Jews out. They did build a second Bet HaMikdash. But Ezra himself did not go to Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because Ezra's rabbi, Baruch ben Neriah, was too old, could not make the trip, and Ezra Sofer wanted to be close to his rabbi. He said, I must study Torah. It is more important for me to be close to my rabbi and study Torah than it is even to partake in this great mitzvah of rebuilding the Bet HaMikdash. Even it says not only that, but also the study of Torah is so great that it's more important than one of the most important mitzvot in the Torah itself. The mitzvah of kibud ava'im, respecting the father and mother, is so important mitzvah, is superseded, surpassed by the importance of studying Torah. This we find when we there for over 20 years. For every year he stayed away from his father, but he deprived himself of the mitzvah of serving his father. He paid for every year. He suffered by having the loss of Yosef HaTzadik, his son, being absent from his home, to think that he had died, to mourn his son for the same number of years as he had stayed away from his home. It says, though, that Yaakov Avinu had stayed away an additional 14 years when he went to the yeshiva to learn. The yeshiva of Shem Va'ever. And yet, he was not punished for those 14 years. Because that was not considered a sin against his parents. To leave parents to go to study Torah, there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, it's a mitzvah. It's more important to go to study Torah than to give kavod to parents. This is when we compare both. The Bet Yosef says, Bet Yosef is the Shulchan Aruch of the Sephardim. Bet Yosef says that if father tells his son, I don't want you to go to a certain yeshiva, not that I don't want you to study Torah, I want you to study Torah, but study Torah here, in this yeshiva. And the son says, no, father, I want to go to a different yeshiva. It's much further away, but I feel that I can succeed more. I can learn better there. And the father says, but son, I mean it for your benefit. I think you can learn just as well here. Because you have our kind of rabbis here. In addition, over there, not only do you have the wrong kind of rabbis, but you also have a danger of abids, a danger of goyim. There's literally a physical danger existing. And the son says, no, father. I feel I can learn better there, and it's worth taking that risk. Now, who says it? I don't say it, I'm only quoting. The Bet Yosef says, that's the Sephardi Shulchan Aruch says, quoting the Rashba, that the law is that in this case, a son is not required to obey the father. It's that of learning Torah, where he feels he can learn better. It is that important that he may leave to that yeshiva against his father's will. Does this mean this gives a son a license to disobey a parent? That's for sure. You will never find anywhere greater stress placed on the mitzvah of respecting a parent than you find in the Torah, in the Gemara, in the Shulchan Aruch. In that same chapter of Shulchan Aruch, that Yosef brings time and again the importance of this mitzvah, the great reward that lies in this mitzvah, and the horrible punishment, penalty that lies in store for one who commits the tiniest act against a parent, the tiniest one. One slight word that might be least bit disrespectful against the parent, as Shalom is considered the greatest crime, greatest sin possible. But in this one case, as we find in the Mishnah, the Mishnah says, Elu dvarim she'en lahem shiur. There are mitzvot that are immeasurable. There's no way to appraise them. They are so important that a person receives reward on this world and in Gan Eden, reward in both lines. And one of them is mitzvah kibud avim. There are a number of mitzvot like that. One of them is respect for parents. And after the Mishnah tells us about this mitzvah and others like it, these which are so much higher than the other mitzvot, the Mishnah finishes with one sentence. But Talmud Torah keneged kulam. Learning Torah is more important than all of those. So great is mitzvah learning Torah. And therefore, if there's a question between the two, the Gemara says that mitzvah Talmud Torah more important than mitzvah kibud avim. The Gemara says that in learning Torah, there is kavod Torah, the respect of Torah while learning Torah. How do we show respect to Torah? Same way we do in showing respect to a Talmid Chacham, one who is learned. What respect is shown to him when you stand up for him, which means that standing up is a sign of kavod, symbol of giving kavod. For an elderly person, for a chacham, this is the symbol of kavod. So in learning Torah too, there is also kavod Torah. The respect for Torah is so great that the Torah should be learned only standing and not sitting. The Gemara says that from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, straight through all those centuries, till the time of Rabbi Gamliel, the chief rabbi of the Sanhedrin, during all those generations, people studied Torah only in a standing position, as kavod for Torah. The Gemara says that when Gamliel Hazakin was nistalek, when he passed away, then a sickness or a weakness came down upon the world, and people were then forced to study Torah seated. They could not stand anymore, and therefore the Mishnah tells us that we are forced to make this quotation, this statement. When Rabbi Gamliel passed away, he was nistalek, then they became lost, void, the true kavod of Torah. No longer could there be seen the real kavod for Torah as had been seen until then. Because once he passed away, there was no longer the kavod of standing for Torah. If learning Torah is done in a seated position, sitting position, you cannot detect real kavod for Torah. That's how it has remained until now. Of course, the Gemara says that a person can concentrate better anyhow while he is sitting rather than while standing. A person has a problem, a deep problem in Torah. He sits down and ponders this problem, he can think more deeply into it. So that a person is learning something that's light, not too deep, he can get up and walk around. If he wants to concentrate deeply and solve a problem of Torah, he sits down for the difficult items. In fact, there are some opinions that even Moshe Rabbeinu too, when he learned Torah, the easier parts will learn standing, the more difficult ones will learn sitting. This is a discussion to get into about that. In any event, the fact that there was such thing as sitting throughout the Torah came to be only after the passing of it in Leo Hazakim. It's important to remember that the word kavod, Torah, is shown by standing. And that's why we have the mitzvah for those who can, during the reading of Torah, Kriyat Torah, for a person to stand, if possible. Standing through reading Torah is the way a person shows his kavod. Just as the Jews stood at the time of Matan Torah, when the Torah was given, they stood before the Mount Sinai. No one, Chas v'Shalom, sat down. The Gemara says that a person who prays before Hashem says, Hashem, may your kindness and pity be showered upon the nest of a bird. This person must be silenced. He is committing a crime by saying that. Nest of a bird means, there's a mitzvah of Shiluach Hakan. A person finds a bird's nest, he must send away the mother bird and keep the small ones for himself. And this, of course, is a pity on the mother bird. So a person praying to Hashem, Hashem, please have pity on this mother bird. That tefillah is a sin. Why so? For two reasons. First place, because this will create a jealousy on the part of other animals, birds, or part of other animals, other living things, because they'll say that this means that Hashem has pity on birds, but not on animals. All were created equal, all created at the same time. So he's bringing a jealousy into the act of creation. Second rabbi says that the reason is, this reason is accepted as law, the reason is that a person is never allowed to say about the mitzvot of Hashem, the reason for the mitzvah is because of kindness and pity. The reason that Hashem said this law is because of pity. Or anything else like shechita, slaughtering an animal to kasher, a very fast death because of pity. We do not accept laws because of pity. We believe in them, we carry them out because they are decrees by Hashem. This is an order by Hashem, and that's all. No reasoning behind it because of pity and compassion and consideration. The mitzvot of Hashem are gezerot, the heavenly decrees. That's the reason and nothing else. And this is very important. An item applies to every single case. In all cases, in all mitzvot, we don't have to look too deeply for reasons. Best reason of all is, as the Gemara says here, it is a gezerah, a decree by Hashem. That is the reason for Hashem's mitzvot. As far as we are concerned, that's a sufficient reason for us. The Gemara asks, the person owns an old Sefer Torah. Is he allowed to sell the old Sefer Torah in order to buy a new one? The old one is in danger of tearing, in danger of having the letters erased. Yet selling a Sefer Torah is a very disrespectful act. Because it cheapens it. How can you take something that's so holy and Chas v'Shalom dispose of it? Unless we say this is not really disposing of it, the motive is to buy a new one. The question is, until you buy a new one, meanwhile, the fact you're disposing of it is still insult to this old Sefer Torah. Is it permissible or not? So the Gemara says, perhaps we can answer this question by a statement of Rabbi Meir. Meir said, it is forbidden ever to sell a Sefer Torah except for two reasons. A person may go to the extent of selling a Sefer Torah only if he needs the money for the sake of learning Torah. It's like tuition. He cannot learn in a yeshiva unless he pays tuition. And if he doesn't pay tuition, he will not get a chance to learn. And he may even sell a Sefer Torah as long as this will enable him to learn, give him the opportunity to learn. Or he needs the money to get married. His desire getting married is so great that he may even sell a Sefer Torah to raise that money. Would this then prove that since we say a person could sell a Sefer Torah to learn Torah, wouldn't this prove that he can sell a Sefer Torah to buy a new Sefer Torah? The Gemara answers, this is no proof. Because learning Torah is more important than the mitzvot of the Torah. The mitzvot of the Torah is one. Learning Torah is something that will lead to obey all mitzvot. Therefore, this is greater. Also, the fact of getting married is so great because this means the perpetuation of mankind. This world would cease to exist if there were no marriages. There'd be no study of Torah, there'd be no Torah at all. So therefore, this mitzvah is so great that in this case only a person may sell a Sefer Torah in order to get married. But to exchange one Sefer Torah for the other, you don't have something more important gained by it, it would not be permissible. The Gemara says now, the person may not sell a Sefer Torah even though he doesn't need it. Meaning even though he has two of them, he has doubles. It's forbidden to sell a double of a Sefer Torah. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, even if he doesn't have what to eat, and he sells the Sefer Torah to buy food, that money that he receives from this sale will never bring him luck. He'll never see any bracha in that money. Here we spoke about selling a Sefer Torah, which is a double thing. He has two of them. You find the Shulchan brought from the Arizal that a person who has not two Sefer Torahs, but two Sefarim, so he has a double in a Gemara, double in a Zohar, and he sells one. That person is called a behemah, an animal. Why? Because we find a pasuk in the Torah by the Rav Bikurim, the person brings the first fruits to the Bet HaMikdash. He says, "Bi'arti hakodesh min habayit." I have cleaned out the holy things of my house, referring, of course, to the fruit. But here the Arizal brings that this is a hint. This person says he has a sefer which is kodesh, holy. The arti kodesh min habayit. Has it? He sold it. He got rid of it. He cleaned out this sefer kodesh from the bayit, the house. The first letters of those four words, the arti hakodesh min habayit, is behemah. So anybody who clears out the sefer kodesh from his house is called a behemah. This is what is written in the Shulchan as actual law. A person should not sell doubles in sefarim. The Gemara says that the students of Rabbi Zakkai asked him once, "Could you tell us the secret of your longevity?" And he replied, "Yes. the secret of your long life? How come you lived so long? What mitzvot, what zechut did you have to get into old age? He said, I'll reveal it to you. There are certain mitzvot which bless a person with long life. The fact that I never called my friend by a different name than his own. The Gemara tells us, of course, that one who calls his friend by a bad name, a bad nickname, that person has committed so great a sin, that's to show he goes down to Gehinnom and doesn't come back. This the Gemara says in the Metzia. He was speaking about, he said, I never called my friend by a nickname, even if the nickname was not a bad name at all. Because even that is wrong. Never to give your friend a nickname of any kind. Secondly, I never in my life missed saying kiddush over wine. There are some who find an excuse to say kiddush over something else, over bread, other ways to circumvent it. He said, I never missed kiddush over wine. In fact, I had an old mother where one time I did not have wine for kiddush. I had no money to buy this wine. My mother took her kerchief from her head, sold it, and brought me wine for kiddush. So I should not miss even one time in my life. When she passed away, his mother, she left an inheritance of 300 barrels of wine. This was a blessing for her. The fact that the Gemara says that one who is careful about kiddush for Shabbat, and he is blessed, his barrels are filled, his coffers are filled. He gets a special downpour from heaven of shefa and beracha. The Gemara says he is the one who was so careful with kiddush. And when Zakai passed away, the Gemara tells us he left an inheritance for his children 3,000 barrels of wine. That's how he was repaid for this mitzvah. The Gemara says that Rav Huna, who was a student of Rav, once came before Rav, and he was wearing a belt made of some type of grass. In other words, he did not have his own cloth belt. And Rav asked him, what's this? What's the meaning of this? How do you come dressed with a grass belt? So he said, I did not have wine for kiddush. I was forced to pawn my belt in order to buy the kiddush, the wine. Rav said, in that case, I give you a beracha. May you be flooded with clothing. You pawned part of your clothing. May you be covered, smothered with clothing. You should have so much. Words were maybe smothered, covered with clothing. Sometime later, there was a wedding. Rav Huna made a wedding. This same Rav Huna made a wedding for his son. Rav Huna was very short, just in height. And in his house, as the guests came in, he was lying on his bed, resting before the wedding. He was so short that his family did not see him lying on the bed. They all came with their coats. Without noticing who was on the bed, they removed their coats and placed them on the bed. And he was buried in this pile of clothes. One rabbi came and saw him beneath this pile of clothes. So he said to him, look at this. The Rav's beracha came true. He said, you should be smothered, covered with clothes. Now, the word of this came back to Rav. When I came to Rav was very angry with him. And he said to him, when I gave you this beracha, blessing you should have so much clothes, so much wealth, why didn't you say to me, as one should upon receiving a blessing, v'chein lamar, meaning the same to you? When you receive a blessing from someone, good wishes, you always say the same to you. Now, I gave you this blessing with well meant. came true in this manner. In your case, it came true with sort of a play on words where you were covered with clothes. It wasn't your own. These clothes were not yours, so it wasn't actually a blessing of wealth, but the words did come true. Who knows, if you would have said to me the same to you, I might have gotten a blessing too, but in a different form. I might have gotten it in real. In actuality, where I would have gotten a lot of wealth from this. You should have replied the same to you when I gave you this blessing. He says too that Rabbi Preda's students asked Rabbi Preda, what was the reason for your long life? How come you lived so long? Rabbi Preda answered them, first, I never let another person precede me to the yeshiva. I was always the first one in the yeshiva, and I never said a beracha before a kohen. Whenever there was berachot to be said at the table, if there was a kohen there, I let the kohen have the kavod to say the beracha first. This was Rabbi Preda. The Gemara asks, how could Rabbi Preda make a statement like that? Is this a mitzvah to let a kohen say a beracha first? Fact is, the Gemara says that any Talmid Chacham who allows a kohen, even a kohen gadol, if he is an haaretz, not like this Chacham, he allows him to say a beracha before him, the penalty for that Chacham is death, because he has disgraced the honor of Torah. The honor of Torah comes before even the Talmid Chacham. How could Rabbi Preda have said, I didn't know because I did this mitzvah of never saying a beracha? This was the reason of my living so long a life. Even that says that the students said, Rabbi Nachman asked him, what gave you a long life? And he replied to them, because I never embarrassed any of my friends. I never went to bed at night without first forgiving anybody who had hurt my feelings or insulted me in any way. And third, I was always a sport with my money. The question of the difference of a few pennies, I let it go. I forfeited it. It was always a sport when it came to small items. And that says that not going to bed without forgiving is the same as one rabbi in the Megillah. Each time he went to bed, he said, before I go to bed, I declare emphatically, I hereby forgive mochel, anybody who has caused me any type of pain or suffering. And in case of a veteran being a sport with his money, it says that Yaakov, who was so wealthy, so great at tzadik and so wealthy, was known for this fact that if he ever bought something and there was a question of splitting a difference of any kind, he would forego his. He would say to the storekeeper, to the shopkeeper, you keep the difference. It doesn't matter. The question of an item that cost 39.5 cents, who gets the half cent? He would say, I forego mine, you can keep it. Or anything in that respect, even on a larger scale. Any doubt of any kind, Yaakov would always say, I'll take the loss as a sport. And this was considered so great in this matter. These are the items which lead to long life. These items that lead to purity in character. Purity in character leads to religion and kedusha. And through kedusha, a person can be zocher, see the Megillah, which we all hope to see. Bezrat Hashem, Bias Mashiach Tikuney Zohar,